The video you're about to see was made by George Kovacevic, whose channel is Georges Smith, and translated by Alexandra Sasha Panic, whose channel is FEMEX. All I'm doing is giving a voiceover and embellishing on some of the details. This is big, guys. This is big. Welcome to the channel, Georges Smith. Do you know what is the universality of freefall, abbreviated UFF? Well, it's an idea that all bodies, regardless of their mass and their materials, fall at the same speed in a universal gravitational field. This idea is equivalent to the claim that the inertial and gravitational masses are the same, as Newton claimed. Newton's law of gravity can show Galilean's law, and from the equation by which all bodies fall to the ground with an acceleration of 9.81 meters per second squared. It can be clearly seen that the mass of the falling body has no effect on this acceleration, because it's not even included in the equation. Hence, it is also good to mention the material of the falling body. Of course, we are talking about free fall in vacuum. Not only Galileo's and Newton's laws are inseparable from this universality of free fall, so to speak, but Einstein's theory of gravity, the general theory of relativity, is also based on UFF, that free fall universality, which determines that all objects accelerate identically in the external gravitational field. BBC, for example, has many times aired shows in which it popularized this idea.
Look at that view. That is fantastic. And it's a very long way down. Aristotle didn't believe in doing experiments. He believed that logic was enough.
Aristotle, the first true scientist in history. A very interesting statement. Scientists use the scientific method by which to verify a hypothesis through experiments. This is one of the most important parts, and it is precisely the Encyclopedia Britannica who calls Aristotle the first true scientist, despite the fact he did not do experiments. But never mind that. Let's carry on.
I've got here 2 tomatoes, one perhaps 100 grams and one perhaps 10 grams. And he said it was obvious that the big one would fall faster if you drop them together, and what's more, that it would fall 10 times as fast. What's really extraordinary is, first, that everyone seems to have believed him, and second, that no one actually did the experiment until 1590, when Galileo said, hang on a sec, I'm going to test that.
And it is unbelievable, if you ask me, impossible. Think, Aristotle died in 322 BC, so they say. So 322 years went by until the beginning of the new era. And when you add 1,590 years to it, because Galileo did his experiment in the year 1590, you get 1,912 years nobody cared to verify Aristotle's hypothesis. If you believe in this stupidity, you either have a very bad opinion about the intelligence of the entirety of humanity, or you're hypnotized. Newton, for example, whom we already mentioned, was convinced that the time belt is significantly stretched, and that many events from the past occurred much later, closer to our times. I will embellish on this later.
So, according to legend anyway, he came up here to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Did you hear? According to legend? We don't even know for certain what happened 429 years ago, but we know what someone thought 19 centuries ago? Come on.
And he leant over, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And he dropped them off. 1, 2, 3, go.
They do land at very slightly different times because of air resistance.
You might notice they said there, because of air resistance. Well, guess what? The air resistance is greater for the larger tomato, which means that it would have been delayed more. But no, the larger tomato is the one that landed first, despite the greater air resistance. But let's continue.
But nothing like 10 times faster. When astronauts went to the moon, where there's no air, they carried out Galileo's experiment with two completely different objects, a feather and a hammer.
Falcon, and I'll drop the two of them here, and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? This proves that Mr. Galileo was correct.
So if you believe that David Scott travelled to the moon and back in this container made out of cardboard and golden foil, then there's no reason for you to doubt the validity of this hammer and feather experiment. The BBC has also aired this kind of video in which they show how different bodies fall to the ground at the same speed when in a vacuum. So this is another experiment which proves the presence of UFF, the universality of freefall. To be fair, at the end of the video, esteemed Professor Brian Cox imagined what Einstein would say to this. And hence, to say so, cited him.
Reason the bowling ball and the feather fall together is because they're not falling. They're standing still.
Svašta čovjek može čuti u današnje vrijeme.
Anything can be heard nowadays. But have you heard of ZAM, Center for Applied Cosmic Technology and Microgravity, and about Bremen's drop tower within it, with a height of 146 meters? I bet you hadn't. Bremen's tower is the main ZAM laboratory and the only lab of this kind in Europe, and possibly the world. For a fee, it opens every day, and for short experiments in high-quality conditions of weightlessness, which can be compared with a millionth of Earth's gravity. So, microgravity, implementing the catapult system developed by ZAM's engineers. The duration of experiments was prolonged to 9.3 seconds, which is unprecedented worldwide. And all this in a vacuum. In this same tower, Dr. Gyula Zas made an experiment on June 21st, 2004, and the BBC didn't report it. Dr. Gyula Zas put into a capsule 7 cylinders of same mass, which means same weight, made from different materials. Everything was carefully packed into the ZAM capsule and carried to the tower. Then the air was taken out of the chamber and the capsule was catapulted in vacuum. In this weightless state condition, a camera recorded everything by making 25 photographs per second. But you have not heard of this experiment or seen anything about it. It is not taught at school. And here is the result of this experiment recorded by the camera. You notice on the right the lead. You notice the drastically different volumes, but regardless, they're not exactly falling at the same rate as, say, the carbon or the iron or the lithium or the barium. No. Looks like it's not very universal, this universal. As you can see, the cylinders didn't fall at the same moment, at the same rate. In other words, UFF, the universality of freefall, was not present. Shocked by learning this, I decided to contact Dr. Zas. I wrote to him. Greetings from Serbia. If I understand this experiment correctly, it shows that Galileo's experiment is just a legend. And it is not true that all bodies in vacuum fall to the ground with the same acceleration. Does this mean that gravity is not directly related to the mass? And that there is something else that determines the acceleration of the falling bodies? To my great satisfaction, Dr. Zas responded, yes, the acceleration of bodies are related to the product of the gravitational charges of the bodies, and not the product of the mass of the bodies. If now you ask yourself, what with the Newton's law of gravity, which states that all bodies are mutually attracted by forces which are proportional to their multiplied masses, and inversely proportional to the squared distance between them, well, that's a good question. As you can notice, Dr. Zas even titled his email with UFF is not present in the green box, top left. And on his YouTube channel, the video which shows the experiment was titled Einstein is wrong. Also, Dr. Zas points out that, like every other experiment, this one should also be repeated in order to eliminate any errors and to verify the results, also known as peer review. Why hasn't this experiment been repeated in the past 15 years? Listen carefully. The Bremen Towers management does not allow for this experiment to be repeated. Think about it. Thanks for your time.